From grade school to the professional level, cross country is definitely not the most popular sport. Although most people know about its more popular counterpart, track and field, if you ask a random American student about their high school cross country team, they probably couldn't tell you a single fact about it. From my personal experience, it seems many of the runners themselves came from other sports like soccer or were coerced into the treacherous grips of cross country by a parent or coach for conditioning. And it all makes sense. Who would choose this fate? From a distance of 2 miles in an icy snowstorm all the way to 10 kilometers in the grueling summer heat, this sport will test every part of your body and push you past your limits during every practice, workout, and meet. So for all new runners, parents of runners, or just anyone who's up to the challenge, let's dive into what makes the sport so complicated and how to understand it best. Welcome to Cross Country 101. Hello everyone, I'm Nicholas Delgado, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Season 3, Episode 3 of Going the Distance. I'm your host for everything to do with high school running in Central Illinois. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and our other socials at Going the Distance IL, and tune in every Wednesday for a new episode. Our new website is also live at www.goingthedistance.co, so check that out to stay up to date with our news. Like I said, cross country is an extremely tough task. It is important to understand all the areas of this complex sport to perform at your peak and to truly enjoy your cross country experience. From a hot September day on the brutal hills of Donovan Park to a chilly November morning at the state finals at Detweiler Park, cross country brings numerous challenges to the racer each week. As much as it seems like an individual sport, cross country is actually a huge team sport with a lot of competition. You will learn in this episode how much each runner matters, along with the basics of race running, to make you the best runner and spectator possible. Before we get into that though, let's look at some definitions that you will need to fully understand this video. The first major definition that you should know are bumpers. These are the 6th and 7th runners of the varsity team. They don't count towards the team score, but they are the tiebreakers, and they can bump another team's runner back to increase their score. These will become very important, as you will learn later. The next definition is CR, or course record. It's a very prestigious title to hold at any course and means exactly what it says. It's the fastest time run on that course. DNF or DNS are another important abbreviations that you should know. These stand for did not finish or did not start, respectively. Both are pretty self-explanatory, but the meaning is very useful, and the difference is important while looking at results because they tell you completely different stories about the race or race day. Now, it's time to distinguish between dual meets and invites. Both of these are types of races you run in during the season, but a dual meet is a meet between only two teams. Scores are usually lower in these because there are only 2 teams to score points, meaning the places are lower than in big meets. And invites are very different than dual meets. They're quite large, and they can consist of as many teams that are invited, which in the case of first to finish at Detweiler Park is well over 100 teams. The next definition, or abbreviation in this case, is PR or PB. This means personal record or personal best. These are used interchangeably, but you get one of these in each distance you compete in, and it just stands for your best time in your lifetime in that event. Next, a scorer. This is a top 5 runner on the varsity team. Their placements count towards the team score, and they all play a very important role. It doesn't matter if you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they all are very important to the placement of the team. The next definition is splits. These are the times you get at each mile marker. They are referred to as first mile split or second mile split, etc. It is important to have even splits in cross country in order to have your best race. If you don't evenly split, a positive split is a term used for a slower split after a faster split, and a negative split is vice versa. So, an example of a positive split would be running a 6 flat mile, then a 7 flat mile after, and a negative split would be a 7 flat mile, then a 6 flat mile after. An average of your splits is your pace. Like I said, it's important to have even splits to run your best race because cross-country races are long and can be brutal, and if you run out in the beginning and you go too fast, you won't finish strong, and therefore not run as fast as you actually could. The next definition is tangents. These are the best routes to take in a race. Usually, these are referred to when making a turn to decrease the distance traveled or get to the next spot as fast as possible. A taper, in reference to training, is a decrease in your mileage in preparation for a big race. We'll talk about this later, but this keeps your legs fresh and ready to run fast. The VO2 max is a measurement of how much oxygen your body can move around. A higher value for this means you're in better shape, but you can always build this up. The number for this is not really as important. It's just that you know the correlation as a higher value means better shape. Also, your coach which we'll get to in the training section, should assign paces and workouts with this, and they'll talk to you what all that means. The final term that we'll go over today is the wall. This is a point in a race or a long run when you physically cannot continue running at the pace you were going at. In long runs, this can happen around 18 miles in faster runners, but this can vary in races depending on how bad of pacing you have. It would be really bad to hit a wall in a race, which is why you train at certain paces to be able to hold your race pace for the 3 miles that cross country will take you in. Now let's get into the basics of scoring. High school cross country varsity teams are composed of 7 runners, 5 scorers, 2 bumpers. Although the top 7 is decided before the race, because you can only race 7 runners at varsity meets, the order does not have to be determined. The 7th runner could have a great race and end up scoring for the team that day, which makes this sport so intriguing to watch. Anything could happen on any given day. Each of these runners play a vital role in competitions, from dual meets to larger fights. Unlike most other sports, in cross country, a lower score is how you win. Each of the top 5 runners gets points for their placement, while the 2 bumpers have the ability to increase your opponent's score by pushing one of their scorers another place down. For example, if a team had their 6th runner, or first bumper, finish before their opponent's 5th runner, they would increase their opponent's score by 1 without changing their score. This is because the first 5 finishers are set in stone already, so any bumpers that beat their opponent's score will only increase their opponent's score. This plays a bigger role in invites, but you can see how important these bumpers can be in order to give as many points as possible to the opposing team. These runners also play an important role in tie breaks, but since this example doesn't contain a tie break, we'll get into those later. Let's take a look at this dual meet, for example, scoring, before we get into more complex invites. Morton and Metamora have been Central Illinois cross-country rivals for some time now. These results are from no particular meet, but should cover the basics of cross-country scoring. In this example, Morton's runners came in at 1st, 3rd, 4th, 7th, 9th, 10th, and 14th. Metamora's came in 2nd, 5th, 6th, 8th, 11th, 12th, and 13th. Take a minute to analyze the scores and figure out who won the dual meet. If you add up both team scores, you will notice Morton wins by a score of 24 to 32. It is important to note that Morton's 6th runner, or first bumper, finishes 10th overall, and in front of Metamora's 5th runner. This means Morton gave Metamora an extra point, because without that 6th runner, Metamora's 5th runner would have finished 10th, making their team score 31. You can see how team depth will play an important role in larger meets. Let's look at an example of a conference meet simulation based on no particular data. If you are listening only, this exercise may be pretty difficult. After finishing this episode on wherever you're getting your podcast at, make sure to check us out on YouTube to view the full video experience of this episode. Visuals are not a necessity though, so like I said, make sure to finish the audio version of this episode first. Let's take a look at these scores above. Morton comes in with runners in 1st, 10th, 11th, 30th, 37th, 45th, and 46th. Metamora, 2nd, 12th, 24th, 31st, 34th, 42nd, and 55th. Washington at places 3, 14, 21, 32, 33, 43, and 56. Dunlap at 4, 13, 23, 27, 39, 47, and 54. Pekin at 5, 17, 22, 26, 35, 38, and 44. Limestone at 6, 15, 16, 28, 36, 48, and 52. Canton at 9, 18, 20, 25, 40, 49, 51. And then finally, East Peoria at 7, 8, 19, 29, 41, 50, and 53. There are many things to note about the scores here, but I'll let you take your time to add them up or analyze them however you'd like before I get into that. Like I said before, this exercise will be particularly difficult if you are not watching the YouTube video. That's okay. We'll go over all the important things you need to know here. But also know that afterwards, go check it out on YouTube, and you'll be able to see a visual of this, and me reading out loud will be a completely different scenario. It'll definitely be better on YouTube, so make sure to go check that out afterwards. The first thing to note is the final scores are super close, showing you that every second counts in a race. Beating out the runner directly in front of you could launch your team up in the standings by a place or two. Another thing to note is that there is a tie for 3rd place here. Like before, the tiebreaker comes down to the sixth runner, in which Metamora would win, because their sixth runner came in one place ahead of Washington's sixth runner. Final note on this meet is the order of the 6th and 7th place teams. Pekin finished ahead of Dunlap by only 1 point. The reason for this, though, is very important. Pekin's 6th runner finished ahead of Dunlap's 5th runner, increasing Dunlap's score by 1 point like I discussed earlier. Now you can see how this comes into play. If Pekin's bumper didn't finish ahead of Dunlap's 5th runner, there would have been a tie, which would lead to tiebreakers. This may or may not have gone in Pekin's way if that happened, so this bumper was extremely important for the standings in this meet. There are a few other notes about scoring in general. First, a perfect score is 15. If your team places its top 5 runners in places 1 through 5, you will score 15. This can happen in dual meets frequently, depending on your team's strength, but rarely happens in bigger meets like invites. Usually, though, a winning score on an invite is under 50, but it can range from as low as 15 all the way up to over 100, depending on the amount of teams entered in the meet. Finally, the pack, which we will talk about more later, has the most points between a little amount of time. Usually, at the state finals for 2A in Illinois, the pack finishes the 3-mile course between 15:50 and 16:10. By getting just ahead of the pack, you can save your team 50 plus points. This plays a large role in bigger meets, and the times and the results will reflect this. Now obviously, this was a lot of information, so let's break it down a bit further and learn how to run a race. There are many important things to consider when running a cross-country race. If you are preparing for your first meet this weekend, know that something will probably go wrong your first time, and that's okay. Over time, you will gain valuable racing experience that will make you a better racer and teammate, but it can take from your freshman year all the way to your senior year, so don't get impatient. Running is a sport where you can see the direct correlation between work and performance, so as long as you stick with your training, you will see your improvements eventually. One of the first things that may come up during race day is nerves. On the bus to the meets, you definitely start to get nervous, but it's important to trust your training. Make sure you warm up well and stretch so that when you get to the line, you're ready to go. The beginning of the race is sometimes the most tactically challenging. Try to maneuver yourself to the front of the line so that you can get out as fast as possible and towards the front of the pack. Once the gun goes off, chaos ensues. You should get off the line at a pace faster than your 3-mile pace in order to position yourself well, and then slowly settle into the pace you want to run the race at. Before the race, it can help to look at a course map to best map your tangents so you can run the fastest race possible. The first mile usually runs itself. Make sure to hold your pace, position yourself well, and not to do anything stupid. As you cross the first mile split, the real racing begins. Find a person in front of you and take 10 quick steps to reel them in, and then settle back into your pace. It is important to stay strong mentally in the second mile because this is where it starts to hurt. Continue picking people off for the rest of the second mile. Once you enter the third mile, really dig deep and push through the pain. Give the last 400 meters all you have, and know that you gave it your best effort when you cross the line. Also know that that one race didn't define you, and use it as a data point to adapt your training. After the race, make sure to cool down properly, stretch, and refuel. Recovery is arguably the most important part of running. Let's take a look at how to view and interpret the results. Like I mentioned previously, one race doesn't define you as a runner, so take each result with a grain of salt. However, there is still something important you can take from each race. Maybe you ran a specific mile really well, or you realized you needed to pace better. It is important to reflect on your performances to get better with each coming meet. Most high school cross-country meets will have the results posted on a website called athletic.net. This website is free to use and easy to claim your profile when making an account. Each meet's results will automatically calculate team scores and display a graph. There are important things to look for here. On the graph, look at your team's bar. That is your spread. That shows the amount of time that was between your number 1 runner and number 5 runner compared to other teams. A lower spread is better because that means your team is running more like a pack, which can become very dangerous in large meets. The next thing to look for is your placement and time individually. By locating these, you can see where your position was in the pack and see the effect of what 10 seconds faster or slower would have done to your placement. This is a great reflection tool as it can push you through the last mile knowing that you can beat out a lot more people if you were just slightly faster. Another important piece of information, especially in big meets, is how your position on your team compares to runners in the same position on other teams. What I mean is if you're the second runner on your team, look at other teams' second runners and see how you compare. This can help you gauge how well your performance is impacting your team and who you should try to stick with during future races. Finally, look for DNS or DNFs. A DNF tells you something very different than a DNS. If you see a DNS, someone could have gotten sick that day or the day before and they were already registered, so it shows up as a DNS. But a DNF could mean an injury or a bad race. These carry a huge weight because they can tell you a lot about what is happening within a team, such as individual mentalities and team strength. Along with these abbreviations are the PR/PB and CR. If someone sets a CR or course record, that means they're fast. Course records aren't broken often, so this tells you that someone is in peak shape and to watch out for them in big meets. PRs can tell you a lot as well because unlike a season record, which are also good, this person is in the best shape of their life and they're ready to perform at their top level. This can also boost their mentality and allow a team or runner to run a race better the next time because of that mental boost. If you're the one with the PR, congratulations. Pat yourself on the back and think about all the hard work you put in. Keep pushing yourself through though, so that you can reach your goals by the end of the season. This leads into the final thing to cover about cross country, the training. This section is not necessarily about a specific training plan, but a general overview of what to expect in the sport. Running is different from other sports in the way that you can overtrain. In basketball, you can always go to the gym and shoot, but you can't really go out and run 20 miles every day and not get hurt. Cross-country training in high school really depends on your age and speed, but mileage is arguably not as important as quality workouts. Some workouts test your endurance and some test your speed. You may find yourself running thresholds for time or progressions for mileage on one day, and then 800 repeats at VO2 max during the next. VO2 max pace is different for everyone, and your coach should explain how to run each workout to its fullest potential. Another important run each week is the long run. In cross-country, these are crucial to improving your endurance. You may find yourself hitting the wall at the beginning of your training during these runs, where you can almost not run anymore. This may be a sign to dial back your training a bit to avoid injury. Always be open with how your body feels to ensure you stay healthy. A final term to go over is a taper. Before a big race, your coach may dial back your mileage for a week or two. This is to keep your legs fresh and ready to run fast the day of the race. Like I said earlier, listen to your coach for workout help and make sure to be open about how you feel to avoid overtraining issues. Congratulations! You have made it all the way through this information-packed video. You have mastered the basics of cross-country, but there is so much more that this sport has to offer. As we roll into the beginning of the season, set some goals for yourself so you can continue to improve throughout the season. A little side note for the parents, you'll be running more than you think as well. This sport may not seem interesting at first, but by conference, I can assure you that you will be running all around Detweiler Park, cheering on your runner and team. Good luck to everyone during the season, and be ready for a traditional style episode next week. Thank you for tuning into this new style of episode this week. If you enjoyed the content today and this new style, let me know in the comments or shoot me a DM on Instagram at GoingTheDistanceIL. Also, if you listen to this full episode in podcast form, I highly recommend you watch it on YouTube for the full visual experience. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date with our new episodes every Wednesday. Also, check out our new webpage at www.goingthedistance.co for the latest news. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and once again, thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next week.